sport of MMA is filled with fascinating personalities.
I honestly think that Hitler was a good guy.
She's just making me horny.
He tried to feed a bus a carrot.
I wanna drink your words like wine.
But you did get it in the first one, and it is there.
There might be someone I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, the guy who spoke at the White House this week. I think he did some fighting before. Before Conor brought MMA fans down this crazy roller coaster, he was just an up-and-comer. But who is that guy? No, not the giant. The guy sitting in the back. That is longtime teammate of Conor and UFC veteran Gunnar Nelson. You may assume since he hangs around with Conor, he is kind of similar to him, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Today we're going to take a look at the UFC's most respectful and stoic fighter who may just have the best jiu-jitsu in the sport. Gunnar Nelson made his UFC debut back in 2012 at the age of 24. Sporting a black belt and an undefeated record with all wins coming by finish, Nelson was definitely a prospect to watch. Nelson quickly dealt with his experienced opponent, finishing him in the first round via rear naked choke. Gunnar's hype train would continue with 3 straight wins, 2 coming by submission, but there was one thing about Gunnar. He wasn't very active. Although he was winning his fights in impressive fashion, he was taking long breaks in between. This left him out of the front of mind of MMA fans. But this might be how Gunnar likes it. In opposition to his brass teammate, Gunnar doesn't seem to enjoy the limelight, preferring a much quieter, reserved life. This inactivity would be a staple of Gunnar's career, and he would suffer some losses against high-level fighters, but continue submitting some of the most dangerous men on the planet. In 11 years, Nelson has competed 11 times. So now that we understand some basics of who Gunnar Nelson is, let us break down what makes him great as a fighter. Coming from Straight Blast Gym in Ireland, Nelson employs a similar stance to the Conor that all MMA fans miss. The wide, karate-esque stance. Gunnar uses the stance with different objectives than Conor. Nelson's main objective on the feet is not to get hit, then ultimately close the distance and look to take the fight to the ground where he is at his best. Gunnar's favorite way of closing the distance is by throwing a darting right hand, which covers a lot of range. Even if the strike doesn't land, it occupies his opponent's guard as he is getting to his preferred range. For jiu-jitsu athletes, sometimes the middle ground of wrestling can be an issue. Nelson has dealt with this in the past, where an opponent is able to defend the takedowns and keep it on the feet. Nelson isn't the strongest wrestler, but he does have a few crafty go-to moves. Nelson has faced off against a surprising amount of southpaws and clearly prefers when his opponent is in that stance. He appears more comfortable shooting in the open stance matchup, and when his opponent is orthodox, he resorts to getting to the body lock. When Gunnar Nelson takes you down, you don't get up. It's that simple. He has tremendous control, passing, and transitions when on the ground. Nelson often makes his way to the mount in the back position. Once he has his opponents there, it's pretty much game over. In Nelson's last fight, Bryan Barberena did a very respectable job of keeping Nelson in the half guard. Nelson employed some okay ground and pound from here, but with the round nearing its end, it was time for Gunnar to showcase some passing. Nelson starts to dig his right foot to the inside position of the leg of Barberena. Gunnar's right arm, which was being used as a crossface, is now a post to ensure balance. Gunnar then pushes down on the left thigh of Barberena while shooting his butt high in the air. This allows for Nelson to free his knee, which was being controlled by Barberena's half guard. From here, Barberena can no longer control the left leg of Nelson, which allows Gunnar to pass into the mount. Clock is ticking though, and Nelson has to get something quick. Nelson establishes control of Barberena's head with his right arm, and then brings his right knee up to Barberena's armpit to move into the high mount position. From here, Nelson lands a very good elbow in short range, which forces Barberena to deal with that arm, which just elbowed him. Barberena does this by grabbing Nelson's wrist. This does stop the elbows, but it has set Barberena up perfectly to get armbar. In a jiu-jitsu setting, you want to keep your arms out of the control of your opponent. When strikes are introduced in MMA, the defensive person wants to control the weapons which might strike them. The problems arise when your control also serves as their control. Gunnar understood this and transitioned right into a beautiful armbar finish. Nelson secured the tap just in the nick of time, taking only 14 seconds to finish the fight after getting the mount. Gunnar returns this weekend against the most active fighter on the roster, Kevin Holland. Holland has struggled with grapplers in the past, but is always a knockout threat. We will see how the UFC's stoic submission specialist will do this weekend, but regardless of that, Gunnar Nelson remains one of the most unique characters in MMA.